my heart just sank. I said, is she okay? He says, where are you? I said, is she okay? He says, where are you? I said, is she okay? He says, we're at your house. We're coming to you. Where are you?
Oh, I'm ready. Never been so sure, quite so still.
I've been trying to shoot this video for months now, and I think it's finally time to just let go and realize that it's not going to be perfect or even what I imagined it would be. I tend to deal with a lot of anxiety on a daily basis, and it's really hard to explain to people what it feels like.
I found a heart that was just like mine. It's the kind of
Last April, I decided that I was going to stop pursuing my degree in computer science at university. It was kind of a long time coming. I never really wanted to go to university myself. It was always just something that I felt like I had to do.
I'm gonna live my life to keep the promises I made. Even though I make mistakes, I know I'm ready.
Just a few days after I made this decision, I saw that Levi Allen had opened his applications for his 2019 edition of his filmmaking workshop on a sailboat off the coast of British Columbia. I can't quite explain it, but I instantly knew that I had to apply and that I wanted to go. I didn't know if I could actually bring myself to follow through, but I had to try. I waited, and finally, just about 2 weeks before the trip left, I got my acceptance email. And so I was off.
Even though he makes mistakes, I know he's ready. For better or for worse, he's gonna carry. We're gonna have our hurts, but it's the treasure of my life, just to spend it by.
There were 7 of us: Brian, Mike, Michael, Josh, Levi, Captain John, and myself. And the story that I'm telling you right now is about a filmmaking workshop, but it's more about the connection that we have as human beings. And the people that I specifically connected with most on this trip were Mike and Michael. Michael is about my age, and we connected on some really fundamental levels. We've been through some of the same experiences in the last several years, and we explored Vancouver together the day before the trip actually left. And from the moment I met Mike, he started asking really difficult questions that sort of eventually would lead me to solidify the themes that I wanted to embed into films that I make. After catching a ferry and making our way to the sailboat, we set sail for only a few hours to Captain John's personal cabin. In the evening that we spent at Captain John's cabin, I started to feel a little bit anxious that maybe I wasn't going to be able to open up emotionally in the way that I wanted to with everyone else on the trip. And I didn't tell anyone this, but I think they could probably feel it. We spent the evening talking about storytelling and what goes into a great story. But then just before dinner, I got to talking to Mike, and a lot of this sort of anxiety about not being able to open up and be vulnerable kind of faded away, because he started to talk about what his whole message in his life is about and why that's so important to him.
Sharon's probably 65 years old, not overly active, not overly fit, maybe even a little bit overweight, but she had decided earlier that year that she was going to get a little bit more fit, a little bit more active. So she started telling us this story about how there was a 5K fun run leading up to the triathlon that she decided she wanted to participate in. So she said, you know, there was this 5K fun run and I decided I was going to sign up. She says, I knew full well I was going to be dead last, but you know what? I just wanted to get out there and do it. And she said, so I ran, and you know, we were about maybe a kilometer away from the finish line. She says, all of a sudden this kid on a bike starts riding beside me, and I looked over, I said, you're here because I'm last, aren't you? And he looks at her and says, yep. And he says, but you're doing great, you're doing great. And he starts cheering her in. And so he rides with her the last little way in, and they get within about 100 meters of the finish line, and he looks at her, he says, okay, I'm gonna ride ahead, and I'm gonna let him know you're still out on course. And she's like, no, don't do that. And Colleen just looks at me and she goes, "You know what, Mike?" She goes, "Now that's freaking badass." Colleen and I got talking about what does it really mean to be a badass, especially in the context of masculinity. And it was super interesting because we were listening to Tim Ferriss and he was interviewing Brene Brown. And one of the questions he asked was something to the effect of, what do you think of the over-feminization of boys in our school system? And it kind of caught my attention, and Brene handled it brilliantly. She said, well, first off, I'm not sure that I think that masculine and feminine are mutually exclusive. And secondly, she says, I believe that that right combination of tough and tender is the perfect equation for badassery. Boom, there it was. When I heard that, it was just kind of, it wrapped everything together for me. And I'd been working on a book project with a little bit less direction. It was a little bit aimless at the point. And when I heard that, it kind of re-solidified the direction of where I wanted to go with it.
The next morning, we set sail and headed to Princess Louisa. This was the first time we were actually able to put the sails up and shut the engines off.
Out of love, breathe in new life in my lungs. Why would I ever run? You brought new light. Whoa, 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 there's no mistaking. You're the only one I want. The only one I want. Come light a fire, burning like the rising sun. I never thought I'd find you, but here you are, flowing like a river, washing over my soul, calling me home.
We spent a couple of days at Princess Louisa, and these were some of the most memorable parts of the trip.
I have a tendency to laugh at all the wrong moments. Sometimes I forget the words to my own songs. I'm not the silent type for an exit sign or a yellow brick road. And you are the one thing that I know. It's in the wild.
Some of the guys went up to a place called Trapper's Cabin on a hike, but me and Michael decided to stay behind and take out the 2 kayaks on board to explore around Princess Louisa. We paddled around the shore for a few hours, and we talked about how over the last several years both of us have been relatively dissatisfied with the positions that we've been in our lives, or maybe just the way that we view them ourselves. A big thing that we talked about was comparing ourselves to our siblings or to our friends or to other people in our lives, and comparing the position that we're in versus the position that they're in, and how a lot of times other people seem more successful even though maybe they're not happy, and maybe we don't all want the same things in life anyways. Everyone maybe finds their happiness in their own way, even if that doesn't mean making a lot of money or having a successful sounding job title. One of the evenings that we spent at Princess Louisa, we were all sort of gathered on the deck of the boat talking, and Mike shared the core reason why he's so focused on the topic of male emotional vulnerability, and why he's even started a company called Connected Men to help men with this issue specifically.
Colleen was staying at my place on a Thursday night. She had to get up Friday morning and go teach yoga. She taught at 6 a.m. out in Fort Saskatchewan, which is about a 15-20 minute drive from my house. And her alarm went off, and she got up a little after 5 o'clock in the morning. She came around, gave me a kiss, said goodbye. I said, have fun at yoga. And off she went. I rolled over and went back to sleep. And I woke up sometime around 7 o'clock, went downstairs, got breakfast going, and as was our custom, I shot her a text at about 10 after 7, and I said, how was yoga? And I got no response, and not a big deal. Well, Colleen was not a huge talker. She's a fantastic listener, and so she often got drawn into long conversations with her yoga students. So I didn't think much of it. I go on about my morning, have some breakfast, get ready to go, get dressed, and I've got a meeting downtown at 9 o'clock, so I hop in the car and I phone her because I still haven't heard back from her, and it's a little out of character. So I phone her and I end up getting voicemail, shoot her another text, no response. So now I'm starting to get a little bit concerned, that feeling in the pit of your stomach when somebody you care about is not responsive, and it's just, again, a little out of character. So I go into my 9 o'clock, finish up, 10 o'clock, I head back to my office. I had an 11 o'clock appointment, so I shot her another text, and I said, hey, let me know you're okay. I'm just heading into my 11 o'clock. I'm starting to get a little bit worried about you. So we finished up our 11 o'clock meeting, and we headed across the street from the office to go grab a bite to eat. And as we were walking into the restaurant, as the host was about to seat us, my phone rang, and I looked at it, and it was a blocked number. And so I answered it, and the voice on the other end of the line says, is this Mike Cameron? And I said, yes. And he says, this is Constable so-and-so, and I don't remember his name, but my heart just sank. I said, is she okay? He says, where are you? I said, is she okay? He says, where are you? I said, is she okay? He says, we're at your house, we're coming to you, where are you? So I told him where I was, and I turned and I walked out the restaurant door, and I don't think I even said 2 words to the folks I was with, and I stood on the curb, and about 5 minutes later, an unmarked police car pulls up across the street, and this big badass burly looking cop gets out in plain clothes. He's got his badge around his neck, the gun on his hip, and I walked across the street, and he sort of met me in the middle of the road, and after identifying who I was, he said 3 words that would ultimately change my life forever. He looked me in the eye, and he said, Colleen is dead. She was shot and killed by an ex-boyfriend who subsequently took his own life. Here's a dude that made a decision with very permanent consequences based on a very temporary emotion. And I vowed on that day that her story would not end there. Subsequent to that, I had many well-meaning friends surround me and pat me on the back and, tell me to be strong. And while I love them for their intentions, it makes me a little sad by their ignorance. You see, true strength isn't about being strong in the traditional sense. True strength isn't about suppressing, avoiding, or remaining stoic in the face of your emotions. True strength is about having the courage to sit with your emotions, feel them, observe them, and learn from them what you can.
That night we moved on out of the inlet, sort of around the corner, and spent the night there watching adventure films in the galley of Captain John's boat. And the next morning we went back to a spot near Captain John's cabin. There's sort of this spot around the corner from his cabin where when the tide goes out, it's all filled with oysters and clams. So that was a really cool experience.
As it seems, sit down at the table now. There's reason, there's reprieve. You never would know. Even those who are yet to come are sharers in your grief. 'Cause in a little while, when all will be over, you're gonna say goodbye.
We spent the last couple days of the trip making our way around to some smaller islands and exploring, with some pretty rough waters along the way. Just these incredible places, these tiny islands with not another soul on them, and you get to just explore. Really, really a special experience.
Is there an answer in the quiet trembling?
And these last 2 nights as well are when we got to have some pretty incredible conversations. We got to hear this incredible story about Captain John and why he has this boat and the whole process that he went through to get it. We all kind of shared what we thought was special and what everyone's strengths were in the group. Just after a few days of being on this boat together, it sort of forces you to see the best in people, which I think is really cool. As the trip came to a close, we headed back into shore. I kind of spent this last bit of the trip and the next day in Vancouver just sort of thinking about how kind of present in these moments on this trip I was actually able to be for the first time in my life in a long time. And in the weeks leading up to this trip, I had a few really special people in my life that were able to help me deal with some difficult and emotional situations that I was going through. And I think they really helped me to grow emotionally just so much during this period of time. So I just want to say to you guys, I really appreciate and love you.
Calling me home.
So after coming home and spending the last 2 months reflecting on the trip and trying to record this video many times and failing, I think I just have to accept what it is and just let myself be vulnerable. And there are a lot of things that I took away from the trip in a filmmaking perspective too, even that's not a lot of what I focused on in this video. And one of the things that I admire most about Levi is that he has such a specific focus on the type of films that he wants to make. That's something that I'm still working on and trying to narrow down what exactly I want to do. And if I put everything that I've got into making video work as a full-time gig and it fails, well then at least I'll know. I'll find something else and do the same exact thing.